What's up, everybody? This is the 2017 Porsche Macan Turbo. Huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales and Service for providing me here with this 2017 Macan Turbo to review for you guys today. So about the Macan Turbos, well, this is the third model year here for the Macan, and hadn't really changed much styling-wise. There was a new performance package you're able to get here for the 2017 model year, but otherwise, the Turbo was still the top dog, and I still think it looks really nice here even several years later. You know, I mean, it's not quite as sharp as the brand new Macans are, but you know, it just still looks really nice up front there. I still like those dual projector headlights there, and you can see the intercoolers peeking behind the grille there with the unique front end that you have here on the turbo versions, make it a little more aggressive. And it's also just really interesting how, you know, curvy this vehicle is. It's rounded off in the front there, it slopes down with the hood, and you see that theme continue through the entire vehicle here, going down to the side profile. You see how rounded everything is, and it's just a very streamlined, just really classic look, I think, that just fits with the Porsche design theme we've seen from 911s and things like that, and just looks great. They also have optional 20-inch wheels here on this one that look really nice here, and you have a staggered tire setup, so they're wider in the back and really gives this car a sporty stance. But then going out to the back of the vehicle, I still always love those taillights, how they're inset within the actual tailgate there, and it gives a little bit of extra depth and dimension. And again, more of that rounded styling there with that hatch, and it's just a really cool look. It's so seamless there. You know, they had to hide the trunk release button there in the wiper because, you know, they didn't have any buttons or anything there, and it's just so nice and streamlined. Looks really great. I love the quad exhaust tips there in the lower part of the rear bumper. And yeah, so overall, I think that the Macan Turbo still looks really, really nice. And, you know, they did some nice refreshes here over the past several years, but I still think that, you know, it's still based on this same vehicle, and I think that the original still looks really good. The interior of the 2017 Macan is definitely a very nice place to be. Obviously a little dated these days, but still very nice with the materials and the layout, and a lot of the stuff has actually aged really well, depending on your opinion on enormous screens in modern cars and stuff. But the one thing that is a downside here, undeniably, with the Macans is that they're a little tighter on the inside compared to everything else that this competes with. So you have slightly smaller back seats, slightly smaller cargo area, even up front here feels a little tighter than a comparable X3 or Q5 or GLC, but you know, it's a little sportier here with the Porsche, and most likely you're okay with that. You're going for that if you're interested in the Macan, but just be warned that it's, you know, not going to be the most versatile. But anyway, sitting down in these seats, the first thing here, you have these awesome 18-way sport seats as an option, and this one has that option, and they just have all kinds of great adjustability here. You can have the thigh support, you also have adjustable bolstering here, and you can see the bolsters are really, they come up really high and they're pretty aggressive, but they're not overboard, especially again with the adjustability, making them, you know, as wide or as tight as you want. But I mean, these seats, the leather has aged so well. This one's got 71,000 miles on it, and these seats have really aged nicely and have held up really well too. They're also ventilated optionally, and they're also heated seats here. And just really love these seats. I love just sitting in them. They feel so comfortable. It's be a great car to go on long drives in with these seats. Next up, though, is the steering wheel here in the Macan, which is fantastic as well. I love the little cutouts here by your 9 and 3 grip, and you got some large 10 and 2 notches here and little scroller wheels here to control the gauge cluster and your audio stuff. And I love the metal paddle shifters here on the back of the wheel. The one funny thing about the wheel, though, is this one is heated, but you wouldn't know unless you know Macans, because this is probably the best hidden button I've ever seen in a vehicle. The heated steering wheel button is not labeled, and it's just this little piece of plastic right behind the spoke here on the back. That's how you turn it on. And but otherwise, you know, a fantastic wheel. I love that the cruise control is still off on a stock and not bundled into a million buttons here on the wheel. Nice and simple, and it looks great too. The gauges here in the Macan Turbo are awesome too. I love the turbo script there in the middle of them, and again, the traditional Porsche setup for gauges with the 3 pods there. Great to have, you know, the analog gauges and then just a little digital portion on the right side there, which can show you some cool things like your torque split and just all your other, you know, boost gauge pressures and all those types of things, as well as a nice little map view there if you want to have that. And it was a really nice setup. I really love the way they did this, and it's a little unfortunate that everything has gotten so digital these days, because I think these gauges really have aged so nicely and are still great to look at. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, another Another really cool thing this one also has is the Sport Chrono package with the stopwatch right up here on the dashboard, and it's just so cool to look at. It sounds great when it's clicking away, and you know, that combined with like the leather on the dash here is just so nice. It makes this interior feel very expensive, which it needs to, because when these were new, these were far and away the most expensive out of everything this competed with, basically, especially whenever you got heavy-handed with the options list. And so, you know, it definitely feels like, I mean, some of these could get up over $100,000 when they were new. And so, you know, in that context, I think this interior certainly does feel, you know, like it's worthy of those higher price tags for sure, with all that stuff. You know, you have the metal here on the doors and everything, and even a little bit of padding down by your knee here, and some nice textures for everything. It all just feels really good. But coming down to this screen, that is one thing that in 2023 here might be a little bit of a disappointment, but you know, it still is great that it's a touch screen. It's easy to use, and it's still really quick and snappy here all these years later. And it's a small screen. You know, I'd say it looks like it's about a 7-inch display or so, maybe 8, but it's you know, again, just fine with all the functionality. You have a volume and tune knob, nice and easy, straightforward. The menu system is really simple, and so everything works really great on it. Now, unfortunately, back in 2017, it was an option to get Apple CarPlay. There was no Android Auto available. Porsche had kind of resisted the Android Auto thing for a few years longer than everybody else before finally giving in. But, you know, so you have CarPlay as an option. I don't believe this one has that option, but, you know, that was something that was available. But if you're looking on the used market here, of course, just make sure that whatever vehicle you're looking at has that option, because that was an extra cost thing. It was actually not a cheap option either. It was bundled with a couple other things, but it was well over $1,000 to have that CarPlay integration. And then otherwise, you have this sea of buttons, which depending on, again, how you feel about buttons, you'll either love this or hate this. Back when these were new, I remember a lot of people complaining about there being too many buttons, but these days we have like no buttons and everything's screen-based. So this is the one part in particular that might have aged really well depending on how you feel about that whole thing. But I mean, just so many buttons. They all feel so nice to press and click on, and they just feel really good. And I don't know, I think the buttons are logically arranged, and once you learn the car and get to know it, I think that it's going to be second nature. You'll be able to, you know, turn things on without even looking, which you definitely can't do with screens these days. And I really like it, actually. All these years later, I think it really is a cool thing to have. And one thing that isn't great, though, in the Macans, in addition to the, you know, slightly cramped quarters, is the fact that you don't have much storage space. Really, the best storage space you have is in the door, where you have these massive bottle holders. So that is one really nice thing, but everything else is pretty much non-existent. You have a little power outlet cubby thing here in the middle, but very tiny. You can't fit much in there at all. Then you have 2 cup holders that are a good size. You have the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded. You open that up, and you'll see a pretty small space that may fit some of the smaller smartphones these days, but the larger ones I don't think would even fit in there. But moving on to the back seat here in the Macan, like I said, it's a little tighter than the others in this segment, but it's still totally usable. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I still have about 2 to maybe 3 inches of legroom to spare back there. Headroom is a little tight, especially with this panoramic roof that this one has, which is beautiful though to look out of. I mean, it's a nice huge roof, and just really nice to have. But, you know, it does cut in on headroom a little bit there. They also do have dedicated air vents there, even their own little climate control, and also some USB jacks there as well. There's also a fold down center armrest, 2 cup holders built into it, and also some nice sized pockets in those doors as well. The trunk is also, again, a little bit smaller than most of the other competitors, but still is decent, and you know, still a fairly average compact crossover for this time period, you know, as far as size goes. Beneath the floor there, you'll see your spare tire, which is nice to see, and also the Bose subwoofer and a little bit of extra space maybe for a few knickknacks, but that's about it. But let's start up and go for a drive. This one does have the optional Porsche entry and start function, so you can just leave this key in your pocket, and there's a little knob here you twist on the left-hand side, which is a unique Porsche thing here, is a race start kind of thing they carried over all these years. But you know, otherwise, you know, the key is actually really cool looking. This one is a little rough around the edges, so it doesn't have all the trim that it's supposed to have, but I love the car-shaped key there, and I always just thought it was a fun key. You could get them paint matched to the car if you want and all that. But again, like I said, keyless access is an option here back then, and you just twist the little knob here, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the 2017 Macan Turbo. So the first thing you notice about this, I think the first thing that I'm noticing is, the great seating position. Again, sitting a little lower here versus the average crossover, but still sitting up high enough that you feel like you're in a crossover. Clearly, this doesn't feel like you're in a sport wagon or anything, but just a great driving position. These seats hugging you in, awesome steering wheel, awesome view too. I have to say that not even like as far as performance stuff goes, but just SUVs in general, this is one of the best as far as visibility goes. You have really pretty thin A-pillars for a modern car. Mirrors off onto the doors, little windows there right at the A-pillar. So easy to see forward. You have a great view forward here, and view out of the back also is surprisingly better than I thought it was going to be, with that rear window being sloped and a little small. I can see out of the back totally fine, which is great. You also do have park sensors and other things like that if you want the extra help. And this one also, for example, has the premium package, which also gives you the lane keep assist, which was a pretty new thing back in 2017. So it's nice that you have that option if that's something you're interested in. But other things here, so all turbo models come with an adaptive suspension as standard, and so there's a little button here for the dampers, and you can there's 3 different settings here. There's a comfort, a sport, and a sport plus mode for that, and then there's also just the separate sport and sport plus modes, which changes everything else up. But this is a cool way to have separate settings. Before there was the customizable my modes and stuff that you have these days. But just cruising in the comfort mode right now, going slowly here, on a park road. It does a really good job of soaking up bumps. I will say, though, that I do feel a little bit more of the bumps, and I feel a little more of the road than I think I do in like a comparable Audi Q5 or something. But again, for a sporty vehicle, you're going to want that extra feel, and it's, again, not so much so that it's annoying or unrefined or anything. It still soaks up the bumps really well, and it's great that you have the adjustability there, so you can have it even sportier if you want. But even here in the comfort mode, it still is totally fine, be a great daily driver still. Another thing that I'm noticing really early on here that I'm really impressed with is this dual clutch automatic. You have the PDK 7-speed dual clutch automatic here in the Macan Turbo and all the Macans, and it's really smooth for a dual clutch back in 2017. Again, we're not talking about ancient times, but Porsche really did such a good job of making them so smooth, and all the tough stuff for dual clutches, like inching up, reversing slowly, things like that, it really does so well that you almost can't even tell it's a dual clutch. And if you're not an enthusiast, you probably won't be able to tell it's a dual clutch, but it's really smooth. And this one even has almost 73,000 miles on it, and it's still smooth, it's still snappy, it's still fast, and just really impressive. It also is really good at just being in the right gear all the time. And you just lean on the gas just a little bit, and it instantly is going to just give you a preemptive downshift, just even one gear, then go down more gears again if you request more power. But it's really well tuned to be very responsive to what you want, and very eager with the transmission tuning as well, which is really great. It just makes the whole vehicle just feel like it wants to go, that it's willing and capable, and it's not trying to resist any kind of downshift or hypermile like we see honestly with some of the modern Volkswagen Group stuff. And so it's really nice the way this is set up. But I'm going to go ahead and put the vehicle into the Sport Plus mode, and that firms up the dampers, gives you heavier steering and quicker throttle response. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. Nice and responsive. Wow. Yeah, it gets up and moves nicely. This thing, it is punchy. Wow. So yes, we have a 3.6 liter twin turbo V6 engine. It does 400 horsepower and 404 pound-feet of torque, and that'll snap off like a 4.2 second 0 to 60 time. I think it's a high 12-second quarter-mile time. It's really an impressive amount of punch. Sounds nice too. This one doesn't have much of an exhaust note to it. I believe that was an extra cost option for the sport exhaust that this one does not have. But still sounds really nice nonetheless, even if it's not super loud. If you wanted more power from the Macan Turbos for the 2017 model year, that was the first year they introduced the performance package, which gave you an extra 40 horsepower, an extra 36 pound-feet of torque, and dropped the 0 to 60 time by half a second down to 3.7 seconds, in addition to giving you the Porsche active suspension management, which was lowered slightly with that air suspension, and it gave you a few other things as well. That sport exhaust was bundled in the Sport Chrono package. A lot of like the other options were bundled in, so it was kind of decent value when it was new, because I think whenever you added in all the other options you got with it, it was maybe paying like an extra $5,000 for the extra horsepower, which for an extra half second faster 0 to 60 5 grand, especially in the Porsche world, you know, wasn't too bad back then. And so, you know, not a bad option. This one, unfortunately, I don't think has that option. You also got bigger front brakes in the performance pack version, but again, all turbos still had really strong brakes. There's 6 piston up front there, 1 piston in the rear, but they're over 14-inch rotors. You know, plenty of stopping power, even though these do weigh I saw anywhere between 4,250 pounds or so, all the way up to about 4,500 pounds. I think that really comes down largely to, again, the options you have on and all of that. But and in Sport Plus mode here, it is ready to go. Even though I'm not giving it aggressive throttle inputs or high G cornering or anything, it is still just wanting to stay in those higher RPMs, and you know, it just really staying dedicated to that Sport Plus mode, which is great. But I'm just gonna put it in the manual mode here and try out the manual shifts here with the paddle shifters. Here we go. Oh yeah, it like snaps into gear and instant, man. Yeah, Porsche really is, I think, one of the best, if not the best, as far as manual shifts with these PDK transmissions. It is incredibly snappy. It is really impressive. Wow, yeah, it is. Man, this thing is so good to drive. And we're on this back road here, and the handling is so impressive as well. Believe it or not, I've never driven any Macan until today, and man, it is not letting me down. It is so good with the handling here. But yeah, I love these paddle shifters. But I mean, so as far as handling goes, you could get torque vectoring as an option. I don't believe this one has that option, but you know, no matter what, you still have the awesome staggers set up here on the turbos. 265 wide tires in the front, 295s in the rear, and they're nothing crazy as far as sporty compounds goes. This is just a regular Michelin all-season SUV tire. But even with, you know, not a super sporty tread, I mean, just the fact that you have such wide tires in the back there, yeah, this thing, it wants to hustle. Man, oh man, it is just doing it without breaking a sweat. It's just so composed. There's no body roll, especially here in Sport Plus mode, which, by the way, hasn't been beating me up or anything either. So I'm kind of impressed that Sport Plus mode isn't, you know, overboard, thankfully, which is great, at least as far as the suspension goes. But I mean, the steering is so perfectly weighted. It's not like overly heavy like you see on some modern cars these days that are really trying super hard to be like, oh, you have to fight with the wheel to turn it. Like, it still wants to turn in. It still feels, you know, agile and all that without, you know, making it overly heavy, but it's just the right amount of heft. And yeah, I love the way this thing handles. But we got this nice tight corner coming up, and I'm gonna see how this thing feels. Wow, it is incredibly neutral. I was impressed there. I mean, you heard the tires a little bit protesting. That's just because, again, they're not sporty tires. But man, and I love the little burps on the upshift. You can hear those even without the sport exhaust here. But yeah, this thing really is so impressive with the handling, and now the roads are even a tiny bit damp right here, so I'm not going to be able to push it super hard, but just to see, yeah, it is so well balanced and just feels so good. Honestly, I was skeptical looking at the engine bay there. It kind of looks like that engine's a little far forward, but it doesn't feel nose heavy, and even though these are, you know, well over 4,000 pounds, it doesn't feel like it's some, you know, big bloated heavy thing, because I mean, thankfully it's a nice small crossover, and even though it's dense, it's you know, it doesn't feel very dense when you're in corners. And let's do another acceleration from a dead stop here. I'm not going to do launch control, but I'm just going to do a little stomp on here. Yeah, whew. Man, yeah, this thing is impressive, and these brakes also are nice and meaty. They have a good amount of bite. You know, you have a little bit of dead travel, and then they start to bite really nicely, and just feel so strong. Even, again, I don't know the service on this one as far as how recently the brakes have been done, but 73,000 miles, and these brakes still are so meaty and just feel great, give you a lot of confidence that, you know, you can push this vehicle and then you can quickly slow yourself down, and it's just so well rounded with the whole setup. And but yeah, and I love this Sport Plus mode. I mean, it does not let up. I mean, it's just happy to sit at 3,500 RPMs and hold it there, and it never gives up and says, okay, we'll go ahead and give you an upshift. Like, it is always ready here in that Sport Plus mode. Sport mode might, you know, be a little more relaxed, but man, the way this thing handles, It's definitely the best out there. I mean, I've driven basically everything this competes with. This is kind of interesting as far as the competition goes because it kind of split the difference. It was more horsepower and more performance than what you got from the average Mercedes GLC 43, even from Volkswagen Group, their own Audi SQ5, and like the X3 M40i. But then, you know, this had less horsepower than like a GLC 63 or the X3M that came a few years later after, you know, the 2017 model year here. And so it was kind of interesting the way this was placed in the lineup. The only one that I think could potentially handle as good or better than this is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio. I reviewed one of those several years back, and that is really magical, and that also has an awesome twin turbo V6, has a great ZF 8-speed torque converter automatic that, you know, does get close to rivaling the speeds of this PDK. Although it isn't quite as good, it is very close. That is the only other one, and that had like quicker steering than this does, so that felt even more agile and eager, and that also had a good bit more horsepower than even this does, and, you know, was very impressive with its acceleration and all that. So I think, you know, that was the only one in my mind that really kind of overperformed what the Macan Turbo is capable of around this time period. And you know, on the used market here, as far as pricing goes, you know, it's going to be all over the place. When these were new, again, they were even more expensive potentially than a Stelvio Quadrifoglio, again, depending on how you option them up. And these days, it's all going to come down to, again, condition, mileage, all that, of course. But, you know, this one is really a compelling argument. I mean, you know, this is a little bit of a higher mileage one at 73,000 miles. But this one's just over $35,000. And obviously, you know, again, you're talking about a used German vehicle, especially a Porsche, you know, a little more engineering complexity, a little more features that, you know, you have to worry about as far as down the road. You know, there may be some stuff that, you know, will give you problems versus, you know, something else that's a little simpler. But if you're worried about that stuff, you can always get an extended warranty or something like that to give you that extra peace of mind. But I mean, the fact that, you know, you're getting a vehicle that probably most likely was, you know, very close to a six-figure price tag, you know, just 6 or 7 years ago is now available for, you know, mid $30,000 range and still performs so well, still holds up really well as far as the interior and stuff, especially if you find one that has Apple CarPlay and you're an Apple user. You know, that certainly helps to modernize this whole experience a little bit more. But as it is, even if, you know, if you don't have that stuff, it's still totally fine with satellite radio, and this one has a Bose surround sound system and all that. Still fantastic experience, still so comfortable, still so much performance, and just so much car, again, for $35,000 here. The only other thing I will say is, as far as pricing goes, you're going to want to make sure you have a healthy budget for gas as well, because these things get thirsty. These are rated at 17 in the city, 23 on the highway, and just 19 combined. Just the one trade-off there to make you aware of, you know, if you are getting one of these and you're on a budget. But otherwise, yeah, I really love this vehicle. It's fantastic. I'm so happy to have finally experienced the Macan, and Macan Turbo at that, which is, you know, really the pinnacle. It's just so impressive. You know, they have the GTS and the regular versions, which I'm sure are great with their handling and all that as well, but it's tough to beat this turbo version. It's just so strong, just feels great to drive. And so anyway, that's really all of my thoughts here on the Macan Turbo, though. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales and Service once again for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Definitely leave a link in the description. You can check out all the info on it and give them a call. If you're interested in this vehicle and you're watching this in the first few weeks, it might still be available. And definitely check it out and give them a call if you want, because it's a fantastic driver. And this one's in pretty nice shape, aside from the key. You know, it really is held up nicely, and it's just so nice the way this one's optioned as well. And so anyway, that's all of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on the Macan Turbo in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.